Hello. So I wanted to say a few things about what just happened in the labor movement in Ontario. It's been a while since I've uploaded a video about my work in the labor movement. I really haven't kept up with things, but a lot has been going on, and in particular, a lot has happened in the last, I'd say, week and a half. But first, I want to introduce myself to folks who don't know me. My name is Julia Sarscott. I'm an executive board member of the Ontario Public Service Employees Union, representing the Toronto region. I've been active in the labor movement for 15 years. I'm a former candidate for president of the Canadian Labour Congress. I'm a longtime delegate to the Toronto York Region Labour Council. And yeah, I've been around for a while. So we just went through a historic thing in the labor movement in Ontario. We were, well, before I go into what exactly happened just immediately, I guess what I could do is go back a week and a half ago when no issue of a mass action such as a general strike was really on the books or discussion in really the labor movement. There have been many of us on the left who have been pushing for mass action in the labor movement for decades, and have, really come up against basically the leadership of the status quo, which has not been interested in mobilizing or really fighting back in a substantial way. Although that has changed over the last few years as different capitalist crises mount, such as, we're seeing most recently the high cost of living in the environmental destruction, imperialist war. And all of these issues, I think, have grated on the working class to an extent now that we really saw what was an upsurge by the rank and file, by regular workers who are unionized, pushing their leadership into action. So when it became public that Doug Ford was going to introduce Bill 28 and which included the notwithstanding clause, I sent a message off to my executive board basically saying that we have to do something. I've talked about the issue of, or the need to defy back to work legislation, which means breaking the law. I've been talking about this for years. We saw Trudeau's Liberals use similar legislation against the postal workers a few years ago. And it seems that, the right to strike doesn't really exist in Canada. Because whenever it came down to it, the government, whichever government was where the affected place was, or affected province or country, nationally, they would introduce back to work legislation which was totally undemocratic and really took the power away from unions and organized labor and workers' ability to withdraw their labor in free collective bargaining as a tool. So when Ford introduced this legislation preemptively, before there was even a strike, I think a lot of people realized that enough was enough. It wasn't just coming from the rank and file, who I think many of whom learned more later on about what the implications were of the notwithstanding clause on our charter rights. But I think it touched a nerve, obviously, on much of the leadership of the labor movement, who frankly have been sitting on their asses for decades, because I think they frankly saw that this was a serious threat to their bottom line, in a sense. So CUPE Ontario announced that they were going to have the education workers announced that there was going to be an emergency demo outside of the Ministry of Labour building on University Avenue in Toronto, and over 3,000 people, or around 3,000 people, showed up to this last-minute emergency rally. There was lots of media coverage there, and we went and we marched to Queen's Park and had a massive rally. It was very inspiring. There were lots of talks about mass action and solidarity, and I was definitely admit I was one of the ones calling for mass action, and so that was a big success. In and around this time, OPSEU announced that our education sector workers were going to walk out and join the CUPE Ontario education workers in a solidarity strike. That act, in and of itself, was hugely significant for the entire labor movement. I'm not sure when the last time that probably has happened was the last time there was really a general strike in this country. And I hear all kinds of references to different general strikes or mass action, such as the days of action against Mike Harris in the 90s. There was a general strike in the early 70s that it's been referred to as potentials if we had gone out. So if I hadn't already mentioned, I think it's important to mention that CUPE Ontario said that it would defy back to work legislation, which is the one of the most important points. A lot's been going on. My brain's a little rattled right now. This is something that leftists and socialists have been arguing about for a very long time. And it really got everyone's attention because it was known that, it would therefore be an illegal strike. And the union and members individually could face fines. So CUPE made it known that this illegal strike was going to take place starting last Friday. Ontario, or the Ontario Public Service Employees Union, announced that our education workers were going to go out in solidarity, and this was their initiative. I should make that clear that the members asked the union that they wanted support to go out to support them in this strike. And thanks to JP Hornick, who's our new union president, and Lori Nanskavell, who's our first VP treasurer, they made it clear that the union would support those members in any decision that they made, that we would have their backs, which I think we certainly would not have seen under the former leadership of OPSEU. So we had, Friday comes along. It's the strike, the big day, and over 10,000 people show up. Mostly probably CUPE Ontario members. There was 55,000 members in that division across the province of Ontario. And so they showed up, and there were many labor allies who showed up, and community allies, parents with their kids. There was over 10,000 people altogether, estimates say, at Queen's Park. And there were also protest actions and pickets set up at MPP constituency offices across the province. So in many ways, it was actually much broader than the days of action against Mike Harris in the 90s. Though I wouldn't characterize it as a general strike, because really there was only 2 unions who were out at that point. But that being said, there had been a lot of talk amongst people, rank and file folks, who were very pissed off, who wanted to expand the strike. I know for a fact that members of OSSTF and the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario were demanding their leadership that they go out in solidarity with CUPEO members. And there was a lot of pressure. I mean, there was a groundswell from the rank and file, from workers who saw this, not only that these workers were being treated unfairly, that they were demanding major wage increases, which is something that workers need and is relatable, and that the attack on union rights Once you got into the nitty-gritty and you realized how the notwithstanding clause was being used, it was being used to override parts of the charter which guaranteed freedoms for, under code-based violations such as discriminations, like, against based on sex, sexual orientation, that type of thing, race. And it would set a horrible precedent, not just for the labor movement, but for all equity-deserving groups. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association put out a report, a press conference, condemning the bill and really waving the alarm bells, saying that this is totally unprecedented and everybody needs to be concerned with it. Even old Justin Trudeau came out against it. The hypocrite that he is, considering that he used very similar legislation against the postal workers a few years ago. So Friday was big. It was really big. And we had the weekend to mull over and push our leadership more. And emergency meetings took place at high levels within the labour movement, at the Ontario Federation of Labour and possibly the Canadian Labour Congress as well, I'm sure, about what the next steps were. Anyway, from what I understand, coming out of those discussions, those broad discussions, some of these meetings had, upwards of, from what I understand, 50 or so representatives. We're talking broad here. We're not talking about a handful of unions. We're talking about public and private sector, the whole shebang. Out of those discussions, there was a plan to have two things happen. And so those two things were that there would be a mass protest at Queen's Park this coming Saturday, the 12th of November, 2022, to be followed by a general strike on Monday, November the 14th. And this was all real. This was all legit. So I was actually at the press conference that took place yesterday, in which the announcement was made that a deal basically was reached around Bill 28. And I was actually pretty miffed and pissed off at the president of CUPE National, who dismissed a question about whether or not Labour was prepared to engage in a general strike by making a joke about a book that he's going to write at some point. Anyway, I don't hear much good about the work that he does, but I think that it had the effect of trying to dismiss the idea of mass action, which frankly is a big threat to many of these labor leaders who would, with an engaged base, you're held to account for your actions or inactions. And so really they don't like it. If they did like it, we would be living in a different society, that's for sure. So these two major actions, and I should mention that, Labour from across the country was sending support, financial and written support. Unions that would typically not really be vocal about supporting public sector unions spoke out. Firefighters Association, the construction unions who actually endorsed Ford, all of them wrote statements condemning Ford's support or his implementation of Bill 28. So come Monday, we're going to have, the labor movement's going to have a press conference. These two actions are the big announcements. So obviously Ford caught wind of what was about to happen, which, it wasn't exactly a secret, but that's okay. I mean, we needed as much time as we could get in order to organize such a thing as a general strike. It all happened very fast. I mean, we're talking about a period of just over 7 days. I think it's day 8 from when the announcement was made publicly that Ford was going to introduce back to work legislation. So all of this happened in a very short amount of time. So Ford finds out that that this is going on, or his advisors find out, and they plan their own press conference. And obviously, a decision is made in the background that Ford would withdraw Bill 28 and make that public. So, which was a huge victory, frankly, for the labor movement. And I think it's important to, because there's a lot of discussion going on right now, and it's all fair, and that includes a lot of the criticisms about how things went down in the moment when the announcement was made that CUPE Ontario would no longer stay on strike, and they would go and return to work while they still negotiated their contract. The fact that Labour was able to gain this victory by defying back-to-work legislation, which was illegal. They broke the law. And then OPSEU SEFPO also had a sector which walked out in an illegal strike in support of CUPE Ontario, was precedent-setting. It was exactly what the socialist left has been calling for the labor movement to do for years, and it happened. So that's victory number one, and it's huge. The fact that in such a short amount of time that the labor movement could seriously engage and talk about a general strike was also a victory for the socialist left. Many of us who have been calling for mass action as a way to deal with multiple crises that workers are facing for years. And I think that the argument that we sometimes hear about the need to, I don't know, I think I need a separate video on this specific topic, but continuously talk and organize workshops to go over different issues. I guess what I'm saying is talk is cheap. I mean, the CUPE Ontario workers, indeed, they did a lot of work. They mobilized their members. There's no doubt about it. And when you go into negotiations, that's what you do, right? Every time a union goes into negotiations with the employer, they mobilize and organize their members so that they can get the best possible contract. There's nothing new there. But often I find that the argument is used against those of us who call for mass action to basically dismiss our demands. And I think that what was demonstrated in the last, during this period, this very short period, is that workers actually they're galvanized and they want action. They're tired of talking. They talk to each other all the time. We're people. We talk to each other about issues that are important to us. And the idea of all of us going out together to fight for something that's important, like human rights, I mean, let's be real, was very inspiring. I mean, when I was in work today, and this is Tuesday, so the press conference was yesterday, I got flack from people who said, why the hell didn't we go out? And these are people who they're not engaged with the union. They're political people, like not party politics, but they have thoughts like all workers do, and opinions. And they interpret what happened as a hugely missed opportunity. And there might be some truth to that. I don't want to dismiss it. And of course the media, they frame what's happened in a certain way, which is not accurate. I think that two things happened, and they happened in tandem. And I say this because I want to try to, if I'm not ranting too much, but try to explain what's going on, because it's not as easy as a total victory or a total defeat. But I don't want to dismiss the criticisms of what have happened, and I don't want to inflate the victory, although the victory is very good. And as far as I'm concerned, the victory belongs to ordinary workers who push unionized workers who push their members or their leaders into action. I mean, it is hands down thanks to them that this happened. So the two things are the CUPE strike. So the CUPE strike is still going on. It's not over. It's possible that they'll go back out on strike if the deal that they're offered is not sufficient. And we need to do whatever we can to support them. And is it possible that it can turn into another situation where we're called for mass action? Absolutely. It absolutely is. The issue isn't over at all. In fact, QPO, their education sector has a huge amount of public support. And that's likely part of the reason why they decided to end the strike. Well, end the strike and continue negotiations the way that they did. So that's number one. And all of labor, the public supports them. All of labor supports them, at least in writing. But labor's not going to be willing to go on a general strike just for them and their wages. I mean, that's just the reality, I think. And I might be wrong. I would love to be wrong. I think that, the issue of job precarity is a huge issue that's increasingly galvanizing workers around the world. I mean, I don't have to explain to folks the huge cost of living and the need to challenge the ruling class and fight for higher wages. But it's difficult for me to imagine that in and itself is going to galvanize the labor movement into action. What galvanized the unions was pushing from below, the leadership, having some of the right leadership in the right places. And I'm pointing to the leadership of CUPE Ontario and OPSEU for making the right decisions that they made. But the focus of most of the labor movement and the concern, I think, was Bill 28. And that's why there was a willingness to take such, drastic action as quickly as they did. Barring that, I don't know that, that everyone would be willing to go out. So those are two separate things, and I think that, we should celebrate the victories, defeating Bill 28, and watching Ford, eat crow live on TV, getting grilled by reporters, and the precedent that sets, not just for Ford, but for any government that tries to use back to work legislation. It's huge. And the way we got there was unprecedented, and is exactly what the socialist left has been calling for years. Number two is CUPE. The CUPE workers are still in negotiations, and we need to support them in any way that we can. And they made their decision. And it's difficult. It would be difficult for any union to say no. Well, okay, CUPE accepted. Well, we're still going to go out on a general strike. I mean, they, I wish that that's what happened, but I think that given where we are today, that was it wasn't going to happen. So is the issue of mass action over? I don't think so at all. In fact, I think that what has been demonstrated through this whole process is that workers, people who are paying attention, realize how quickly we can respond to a crisis if we choose to do it. I mean, this all happened, like I said, in an 8-day period. I mean, I've been calling for mass action for years. I didn't think we could do it quite that fast. It's a pleasant surprise. I think that it's something that we should all remember and make reference to, because that's the other thing, is I think we need to remember that this is how it went down, and that we can do it again, because the crises are mounting. The cost of living is going through the roof. Wages are not keeping up. People can't afford, let alone they can't afford to buy a home, they can't afford to pay rent. We have an ecological, environmental crisis that's destroying the climate. We have imperialist wars and aggression. I mean, the list goes on and on. We're right in the middle of a capitalist crisis, as someone mentioned to me recently. They've never lived in a period where there was so many shitty things happening at the same time. And we know through history that mass action and the working class, we're the only ones who can fix the mess created by the capitalist class. Nobody else is coming to do it. It's up to us. Anyway, I think it's all been a very empowering experience. And I know that some people are feeling a bit deflated, and there's no doubt that, the CUPE Ontario bargaining, that they're going to lose a bit of momentum. There's no doubt about it. But because it's not over for them. And really, this issue of workers' rights is not over for any of us. It's only beginning. But I will end this video by saying that I think that we're closer to a general strike today than we've been in a very long time. And I know that it's not going to happen on Monday, but it could happen, as we've seen, right? It could happen much sooner than we think. So that's it for me for now. It's getting dark outside. Wanted to share some of my thoughts. I'm going to come out with an article, which I'll be likely posting on the Socialist Action website. And also, I'd like to hear what you think. Maybe it'll prompt me to do these videos a little bit more often. So if you want to ask any questions or make any comments, you can put them in the comment section of this video, and I will follow up with a video. Okay, bye for now.